It is now my honor and distinct pleasure to introduce John MacAdams, CMTP and IMTA certified professional mindfulness teacher. He's senior trainer and program manager for the Center for Mindfulness and Public Safety. John's been a mindfulness practitioner for over 40 years and has more than 14 years of experience working in corrections and public safety. He has served as a senior chaplain at the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department, Men's Central Jail, and Twin Towers Correctional Facility, part of the USA's largest jail system. John has trained law enforcement, custody, facility case managers and social workers, probation and parole, border patrol, and correctional officers across North America. He has trained over 1,000 personnel in the Mindfulness-Based Wellness and Resiliency, or MBWR curriculum, created by the Center for Mindfulness and Public Safety. His presentation this evening is entitled Building Resilience and Mental Fitness, Key Insights for Corrections, Law Enforcement, and Public Safety. It is abundantly clear none of us would be here tonight were it not for John. I know I would never have become a mindfulness teacher were it not for you, John. I am grateful. Welcome.
Thank you, Robert, and thanks everybody for joining us. I'm going to share screen and we're going to get into a little presentation and let's see what happens here. Okay, so yeah, I just posted a little article on LinkedIn, and it's titled, whatever that title was that Robert gave for the presentation, and I'm going to address some of that today, and we'll have some dialogue. Please, at any point, if there's any questions, comments, insights, please just unmute and speak up, or if you want to put anything in the chat, maybe Robert, you could monitor the chat. And so please do feel free, we can be in dialogue. With that, I'm going to push ahead, and there's a lot that I kind of like to get to and talk about. So when we, consider mental fitness and resilience, I know that we talk about mental health a lot. And the two are obviously parallel and related. But one of the ways that we can look at mental fitness and mental resilience and how to build and maintain our mental fitness and really thrive throughout the life is to have some understanding about the brain. Obviously, the brain is sort of the main driver of our cognition and our ability to navigate through the world, right? So we know that with a decline in our cognition, that there are great challenges. So we'll take a little bit of a look at, the challenges of dementia, which is when the brain is really, really challenged. And there are a number of reasons that one might develop dementia. There are a number of different types of dementia. Some are kind of out of our control, and some of them we may be able to have quite a powerful effect on our resilience in terms of our brain's cognitive facilities. We'll look at some, assuming that we're cognitively stable or and basically doing okay. We will look at some of the basics of brain science. We'll take a look at what's been called the amygdala hijack by Daniel Goleman, negativity bias. We'll look at neuroplasticity, which really is a superpower if we choose to harness it. And then we'll do some practice, and we'll talk about some practice. So cognitive stability or decline. So these were some stats that I was able to gather quite quickly. They were published by the National Institutes of Health and the Alzheimer's Association. So clearly there's a very high risk for us. And none of us are statistics, and it's really important for us to understand that these are statistics. They are gathered from huge numbers of individuals. So this does not point at any one of us here, but it seems very true that with 42% of of adults age over 55 to developing dementia at some point. And we're seeing even higher risks for women, 48% as compared to the men, with 35%. We need to take this very seriously. And unfortunately, there are Americans, and I would imagine that most of us or all of us have either a relation or we know somebody who has experienced dementia, and it's profound. It is a profound shift in our quality of life and our ability to relate. And so if there's any way that we can keep our brain healthy, functioning, then we're going to talk about that and look at strategies and tactics to do that. So what are some effective tactics, right? So there are a number of, I've done a little bit of research around this. There's a number of causes. One of the causes, of course, is genetic, and there can be genetic predisposition towards dementia. Sometimes we hear genetic and we think, oh, that's irreversible or unchangeable. In truth, it's genes don't always express, even though they're there, right? So it's not a life sentence or a death sentence to find. If you do find out, if you do some genomic research on yourself and you see that you may have in your system genes that would point you more towards developing some form of dementia. Again, it's just a pointer. So even genetically, there's no certainty one way or the other. Now, in terms of what's been recognized as sort of lifestyle choices that we can really apply to reduce and potentially prevent the potential for dementia to come on, these are three of the most highly recognized and effective tactics we can take. So regular physical exercise. Of course, physical exercise seems across the board to be so important for us, but in particular, aerobic exercise, and you can see here, even brisk walking, it gets the heart rate up. Aerobic exercise is simply getting our heart rate above our resting heart rate. And there's a lot of things that go on. Doing strength training, is been shown to be particularly helpful. Working with our balance and flexibility, our balance. Again, these can have effects in so many aspects of our life, right? Fall, risk, et cetera, in terms of balance and flexibility. So regular physical activity, cognitive activity or cognitive engagement here. When we engage our mind, we are, and we'll take a look at this idea of I think it's called a cognitive surplus, but we'll see it later on when we look at neuroplasticity. But as we work with our brain, as we work with our mind, as we learn new things, as we challenge ourselves cognitively, the brain is firing and it is staying healthy. So this is highly recommended that we engage, and really as lifelong learners is one of the approaches that we recommend for folks to consider for themselves. And cardiovascular and metabolic health, that may sound a little bit similar to the physical activity. And if our physical activity is in good shape, often that can help reduce our metabolic challenges. But again, much of this blood pressure is very much controllable through pharmacological means, and diabetes can very much be treated and taken care of. So these are some ways that we can help to reduce the potential of this risk to our brain. So let's take a little look at some of the basic science around the brain, understanding through so much research that has been done. So, it weighs about 3 pounds. It's got a lot of brain cells in it. Of those 1.1 trillion brain cells, up to 100 billion of them are the gray matter neurons. Those are the ones that fire, and they fire synapse back and forth. And the brain itself actually takes a great deal of our energy, our blood flow, so 20 to 25%. When we keep our body healthy in terms of our cardiovascular work, it's extremely helpful. And as we go into higher intensity physical activity, that flushes blood not only to the rest of the body, but also to the brain. So very helpful. This idea of neurons firing so quickly, up to 50 times per second, and signaling all the way across the brain. So when we look at this potential that there are 5,000 connections with other neurons, and we're looking at 100 billion neurons, that's a lot, right? 500 trillion synapses. This is really inconceivable, I think, for us mere humans, and yet it's right up here, and we all got one. And I think that points a little bit to the fact that we have phenomenal capacities with our brain, and I don't think they've all been realized, and we all have this potential to grow, learn, and thrive. Yeah. So we'll take a look at this triune brain theory. Paul MacLean was a Canadian psychologist. This theory, the specific triune brain theory, where he posited that there were basically 3 different brains up inside the skull, this has been debunked. This is absolutely not what's going on in the brain. However, when neuroscientists do brain scans, there are certain areas of the brain that do, light up or that do activate. There's a chemical and electrical activity that can be recognized and seen through different scanning mechanisms. And in basically the parts of the brain that are associated with threat and survival, this brainstem area, what he called the lizard brain, the mammalian brain, really around emotions, memories, and habits, that's sort of in the middle there. The amygdala are part of that. We'll revisit the amygdala. And then this newer part of the brain, the neocortex, where we have all our higher functioning, our abstract thinking, our ability to be creative. And so these are not separate. In fact, a well-functioning brain is very much integrated, and we want our brain to be extremely integrated. We don't want it separated like that. So the way neuroscience is seeing the brain is this highly integrated brain is a healthier brain, right? So one way for us to think about the brain, and sort of riffing off this idea of the 3-part brain, or understanding that there is at the top of the brainstem an area of the brain that does activate when we're going into survival mode. And we've heard of fight, flight, or freeze. So that sort of instinctual survival mode. So we could think of that as being here at the bottom of the hand, the top of the brainstem. And then we have this part, this limbic part, the middle part of the brain, where the amygdala are, and our emotions are. A lot of language and emotion synthesizing is happening here. And then we've got this big old neocortex. So you wrap that over. This is, Dan Siegel does a lot of work with children. And so he sort of put this together as a little hand model so that children can just kind of have a very simplistic sense of what happens when, so we're all integrated, everything's working very nicely. We get triggered, something happens, something bad happens, or we perceive something bad happens, and we flip our lid. And of course, when we flip our lid, we don't make good choices because we don't have access to this part of the brain that's making good choices, right? So what we want to do is learn how to re-engage, right? So we can learn all kinds of tactics to re-engage this part, this neocortex that is where we can make these better choices, have the abstract thought, be able to really reflect on what's going on. And if that flips again, we just learn how to do this. So this really, I think, is a pointer towards there are skills that we have. We're not always a victim of our environment such that we get triggered out and there's nothing for us to do. I think this is like, particularly for the kids. Okay, well now I'm gonna address this and utilize my skills to reintegrate my cortex there, right? So flipping the lid. It's a bit of an expression. We all sort of know what that looks like and feels like for ourselves. So Daniel Goleman, who wrote the book Emotional Intelligence, coined this term, the amygdala hijack. I had mentioned that the amygdala in the limbic system, the central system of within the brain, and he posits that the amygdala are often seen as like the alarm bells that go off in the brain. to activate that survival mode. And they can become more or less sensitized depending on what we're exposed to. And those of us who are exposed to more challenging, particularly traumatic events, our amygdala can become more and more sensitized, meaning that we can perceive greater threat than may actually be existing in our environment. And those amygdala, in a flash of a second, can activate cortisol and other neurotransmitters that kick in that survival part of the brain. And in fact, it happens faster than we can work with our neocortex and actually think through what is the actual challenge. So we have heard of, sort of the classic mother's able to pull the child out from an oncoming car before she even knows what she's done, right? Or we do that for ourselves. So that's a physiological function of the brain. It's not actually, an emotional response. It's really a physiological response. And so what Daniel Goleman was saying is that as the amygdala start to get, at any point when we get triggered or when we perceive this as a threat, the amygdala will start to fire off, and they send these signals to the survival part of the brain. And this good thinking part of the brain goes offline, and we're likely to make poor judgments, bad choices, and can actually make a bit of a mess, right? Particularly if we're really angry, right? So what's happening here? We might say there's an amygdala hijack going on with this individual, but there's a lot going on. So I mean, when I first look at this, it's kind of like, oh, he's having a meltdown, right? This is an emotional response to whatever's going on. It's the final straw. The final straw, he blew a gasket. But of course, there's all kinds of things physiologically going on. We know, and if we've ever been in a state like that, I have been in a state like that. There's a lot going on physiologically. Adrenaline goes up, cortisol goes up, the heart rate goes up, the breathing, the respiration rate increases. There's a lot of physiology involved with what's going on here. And again, just this sort of very simple idea, what's going on in the brain is that the survival mode's going on and the executive functioning is becoming disengaged. And so if any of us have been on the other end of that phone, we know what it sounds like and feels like to be bludgeoned like that. And if any of us have been on this side of the phone, we know that we may have made a mess that we needed to clean up. So this is about learning. It's not about us beating ourselves up or shaming ourselves or blaming ourselves. It's simply about learning and beginning to recognize, oh, maybe, there's something going on. We might recognize it physiologically. We may have the understanding, oh, my brain's going offline. My good thinking brain's going offline. What can I do? What can I do to bring it back online, right? And when we're living in that amygdala hijack, in that sort of high threat space, and if we're working around a lot of people who are in that state, this is what our life starts to look and feel like. And again, if we're in a workplace or with a lot of people who are living in an amygdala hijack, this is what our workplace can start to look and feel like. So this doesn't have to be this way. It actually doesn't have to be this way. There's plenty of options, skills, trainings that we can do to at least flip back if we notice that we're flipping out or flipping our lid, that there are ways for us to come back online. So one of the reasons that this amygdala hijack is such a prevalent potential to come up is this understanding of negativity bias. So again, this is something that has come about through a number of years. It was first posited by psychologists who didn't have brain scans equipment, but there has been a lot of scientific support for this idea of the negativity bias. So the negativity bias basically is the understanding that our long-term memory and that our brain is set up, and we are set up as creatures who have survived however many hundreds of thousands of years. We're set up to pay more attention to threats and danger and negativity than we are to pay attention to things that are not threats or potentially good and feel okay. And so when we do encounter something that we perceive as a threat, or even something that's particularly uncomfortable, a loud noise, that memory with great vividness, clarity, and detail goes into our long-term memory. So it goes into our long-term memory. And, we need to remember what is a real threat. However, when we're having basically a good experience or a neutral experience, those experiences are happening in our short-term memory, which functions quite a different way. And basically, those experiences just go right past us. Unless the science says we hold on to and engage with those experiences for 12 to 20 seconds. So that's what the science is telling us. If we are having a good experience, whatever that might be, and throughout our days, maybe somebody gives us a pat on the back, maybe somebody gives you a hug, maybe you see something that is pleasant to you, and you choose to, as Rick Hansen here says, savor the good. So really to savor that, or to hold on to that, to really try to experience that for 12 to 20 seconds. As we do that, what's held in the short-term memory at that period of time starts to go into our long-term memory. You can start to balance out all that negativity. So our long-term memory is very much full of negativity. We as humans are kind of addicted to negativity. When you turn on the news, what do you see? When you look at some of the most popular TV shows, when we're looking at the whole genre of reality TV, there's a lot of negativity, toxic drama. And, people ask, why don't they put good news on the TV? I want to see some good news. And people would turn it off because we're kind of addicted to this heightened state of engaging with negativity. So Dr. Rick Hansen says that the way he describes is that our brains are set up like Velcro for negativity, we will stick on, and that Teflon for positive experiences. And his phrase here is savor the good. So if this can be a little something that you post up with a Post-it, or however you work with these types of aspirations, this is something we can bring into our day and really start to balance out some of that negativity. And as we are looking for these positive experiences to hold for 12 to 20 seconds, we'll actually start to orient our attention and awareness towards less towards negativity and more towards positive experiences. So we haven't gone into neuroplasticity. This slide just jumped up on me a little bit. So we're going to come back and do this practice in a minute, but I wanted to start to look a little bit at neuroplasticity. And as I said originally, really look at this as a superpower, one of our superpowers. Neuroplasticity is simply, as defined by this researcher, the brain's ability to change its anatomical, neurochemical, and functional performance status across the lifespan. So, for such a long time, it was the understanding that the brain we got was the brain we got, that we, as kids, we were extremely malleable and we could learn we could learn a lot. But as we reached our late teens, early 20s, that our brain reached its pinnacle, and that over time it would basically diminish. And some of that is supported in the culture with this idea of IQ and getting an IQ test and what's your IQ, and the misunderstanding that IQ is fixed. IQ is actually not fixed. If you're interested to find out a little bit about the IQ test, there's a Frenchman who was working in elementary schools, I believe, and he was in the school system, devised this test because he wasn't trying to categorize individuals as having this IQ or that IQ. He was looking for opportunities for further learning and training, like what were the gaps. So the IQ of any individual is not a fixed item, right? They're through working with our neuroplasticity, understanding that the brain is constantly rewiring and building and sort of making more substantial or robust our neural pathways, whatever it is that we're doing repeatedly, that we can learn new things. We can improve our intelligences. And we now know there are many different types of intelligences. So what are some of the advantages of working with our neuroplasticity, particularly in a directed in a way that we are trying to have a healthier mental state, right? So cognitive reserve, again, this is something fairly new that I've learned about, but the cognitive reserve is simply the idea of having more neural networks in our brain than we would have if we were less engaged. So if we're more engaged in learning and in doing the work that it takes to utilize our neuroplasticity to expand the cognitive abilities of our brain, we create a cognitive reserve. And this cognitive reserve is like money in the bank. It's like extra muscle as we start to grow old. There is deterioration over time, but the more cognitive reserve we have, sort of the longer we stay sharp, right? So again, we really encourage lifelong learning, and we know that people can learn all the way through their, and unless we do encounter dementia, people are able to learn throughout their lifespan. So cognitive reserve, we can create a cognitive reserve. Having a cognitive reserve really, and the ability for neuroplasticity really supports recovery and adaptation. So if we have, a lot of people get strokes, so there can be minor brain damage, and this neuroplasticity actually provides the mechanisms that the brain is able to rewire around these damaged areas and regain some, if not all, of its function. So, this has been expressed by Donald Hebb, a Canadian researcher who worked a great deal in Montreal and McGill University, that neurons that fire together wire together, right? Neurons that fire together wire. He didn't say it actually like that, but this is a great way for us to understand that we have, we have the capacity to self-direct our neuroplasticity, that we can really harness and leverage this capacity. So there are two recognized ways to increase the plasticity of the brain, to make it more moldable. So you see them here: mindfulness practice that we do weekly here. Mindfulness practice has two benefits. One, it actually makes the brain more plastic, but then it also kind of nudges it in the right direction. So it can be very beneficial towards less reactivity, less depressive thought, less negative thought, and more towards well-being and happiness. And again, a great deal of research and literature out there if you'd like to look deeper into that. Aerobic or high-intensity physical training, that creates the environment where the brain is more plastic. So one could utilize that as a technique to then try to learn after you do your aerobic physical training. You do aerobic physical training and then take on a challenge, start some problem solving. We are all solving problems all day long as we encounter new operating systems and software updates, and we're problem solvers all the time. So those are two ways that we can really help that brain to become more neuroplastic. Now, the actual rewiring happens while we're sleeping. So sleep, of course, is very much another element of healthy mental state. I don't have a lot to say about that, but one could do quick research on the benefits to the brain for having good regular sleep. There is a process where the brain sort of goes and removes waste products in the middle of the night while we're sleeping, and this is where our neuroplastic rewiring actually happens. So I've heard very interesting discussion on utilizing neuroplasticity in learning. That so as a musician, I've done this so many times, starting to learn a new, a line, a new phrase, a new chord pattern, whatever it is I'm learning. And it's actually recommended that you keep working on whatever it is you're working on until you start to get frustrated. You actually you can raise your skill level to a certain point, and then it kind of starts to drop off. It's like, I keep blowing it. I'm not getting the fingering quite right. And you can actually get into a bit of frustration. And then when you sleep overnight, the neuroplasticity actually starts to rewire, and you are more apt and more able upon waking the next morning to be able to do that task. So what are some of the creative ways that we can have positive impacts on our brain and work with this idea of changing the structure? And understanding that, as Habit said, neurons that fire together wire together. It's really repeated applications of these, repeated frequent repetitions. So formal mindfulness meditation, we've spoken about that already. Orienting ourselves towards gratitude. So there are a number of ways that people work with gratitude. The idea of a written gratitude list. We can have an internal gratitude list. I have a friend of mine who, when he's doing certain exercises, he runs through a mental internal gratitude list, and he has made that part of his practice, and he finds it to be extremely helpful. We can do spoken gratitude. We can speak to our friends and offer them our gratitude and appreciation. And whenever we're really orienting ourselves towards gratitude, I mean, if we imagine we're sitting down with a pad of paper and starting to write out a gratitude list, well, I'm grateful for my family. I'm grateful for my livelihood. I'm grateful for a roof over my head. I'm grateful for my clothing, etc. We might find we're starting to write a number of lines, many pages. If we spend 10 minutes writing out a gratitude list, well, how do we feel? Well, generally, we feel grateful, and grateful is kind of the opposite of feeling entitled and pissed off. So a nice positive orientation. The idea of working with this savor the good practice, knowing that as we're savoring the good, we are rewiring our brain. And so the safe, resource, and connected practice that I sort of slid over that slide just a minute ago, we'll go back and do that practice soon. And physical stress management. So the idea of working with yoga or Tai Chi or some way to manage the stress in the body, and straw breathing that we've done here many, many times, ways to self-regulate ourselves physiologically. So understanding that, we have these capacities, at least these opportunities to work with our state, it's particularly helpful to take advantage of that when we are by ourselves and when we have some free time. It can be more challenging when there are demands of the workplace or demands of the family. But many of us who do commute really find that can just be a golden time to take better care of ourselves, right? So some of us jump in the car and turn on the news and start to listen to all the bad news and kind of restart replaying and looping through all the bad stuff that happened during the day. And that's an option. But the recommendation here is to not do that, is to really make a clean break, and understand that we are going through a transition. We can leave work with work, and we can start to prepare ourselves for our next transition into whatever it is we're going to be doing, meeting the family or going into a community situation, friends situation. So here are some recommendations. Mindful driving. So what does that mean? Well, obviously it means we want to pay attention to what we're doing driving wise. Some of the techniques you can do that, you can actually try to feel the texture of the steering wheel. I mean, I live in California, and sometimes I turn the steering wheel heater on just to kind of get a sense. I can feel that, I can feel that. I've got a seat heater. I turned it on this morning. It was, 55 degrees, but I turned it, I could feel it. So you may be able to feel the suspension of how the car is bumping over the road. So mindful driving can be done very much through the sense of touch and feel. Focusing on the present moment, working with what's going on outside. Here's a picture of a lovely, forest we're driving through. Whether we're driving through a suburban or an urban environment or a rural environment, noticing what's going on outside the windshield. Working with straw breathing, working with some of these breath regulation skills really help to ground us, bring us back into the present moment. And the idea of curating our own music and playlists, right? So depending on our state, we can prep in advance. If I'm feeling sleepy, maybe I need more of an upbeat music list. Maybe if I'm feeling a little hyper, then I need something that's going to kind of help mellow me out. We could have a number of lists and go, okay, I recognize, do a quick reflection. Okay, I kind of feel like this. I want to play, playlist number 3, the one that gets me up and excited. There's also an opportunity then to go into learning. We could listen to some motivational or some learning training audio or podcasts or books on tape. And there may be an opportunity as we're going through these transitions to go to the gym or stop at some place, do a little bit of a workout, really help with the whole sort of mind-body connection and synchronization as we do some level of workout. We really can ground ourselves where we are and help to make that distinction between what we're leaving and what we're coming into. Okay, so I'm just looking at the time now. So we'll take a quick look at some of the mindfulness and mind training, and I think we will do a quick practice. So what is mindfulness? There are a number of definitions of mindfulness. One of the most recognized, popular one from Jon Kabat-Zinn, paying attention in a particular way, on purpose, in the present moment, and non-judgmentally. And you see there's some other ones that you'll have access to that are a little more involved. So basically, mindfulness practice, when we're doing mindfulness practice, we may encounter judgment, right? And that's fine. That's not abnormal. And we may encounter, and we generally will encounter some sort of internal dialogue. There may be some emotions that come up. And we're actually, as we practice, we're providing that environment for our being to allow some of these emotions that we may have held down or repressed just to come up. There may be some physical reactivity. We may get agitated. We may just get a bit of a sore knee, a sore back. And sometimes we have extremely pleasant experiences within our formal practice. We may feel very tranquil, right? And we may want to cling on to that. Like, that's what I want. Every time I practice, I want to have that feeling. So the idea is that when we're doing practice, we are intentionally directing our attention, our curious attention, to our present experience without becoming overwhelmed by. So we'll experience judgment, internal dialogue, and emotional activity, and physical reactivity, and possibly, a really great feeling we want to reproduce. And knowing that that's just part. So that's kind of an open acceptance that we have. And this can really train for emotional stability. Let me just kind of go through here some of the, just really quickly, you can see there's a phenomenal amount of research, a lot of research being done in Canada, in the University of Toronto and Ottawa and McGill, really throughout the United States, and throughout Europe, and really all across the globe. This is such a profound and powerful skill and really movement around mindfulness and working with mind training. This is Amici Jha. Highly recommend her book, Peak Mind. You may enjoy that. And mindfulness training changes the brain. And there's just an incredible amount of literature out there that could help us to know more about that. So what are the positive impacts? Emotional balance, as I said, attentional balance. Really, our mental health can be shifted towards a more positive aspect through doing mindfulness practice. These are actual Peel Regional Police up in Ontario, doing a mindfulness practice session. So we can do just a little bit of practice. Why don't we just do a short practice, and then maybe, Robert, if you've got some thoughts on prompts, we'll move into into some rooms for discussion, or we can have an open discussion. So on this call, we regularly do body scans. So I think that I'll leave that for now, and I'll just invite us all to set up our posture, refresh your posture in your chair, whatever sitting or seating arrangement you have. And I'll encourage you to close your eyes if that's comfortable for you. I've put out a lot of words, a lot of thoughts and ideas. Here, I'm going to encourage you to start to bring your attention inward. Bring your attention inward. Start to reflect on your physical state. How do I feel? Do I feel tired? Am I bored? Am I, eager to learn more? Am I overfull? What does it feel like internally to be you right now? So mindfulness of our body. We're just starting to place our attention throughout the body. So you can do it just a very brief body scan. Is there any place that hurts? Is there any place that's a little tight? Is there any place that feels quite relaxed? And within the body, connecting with the sensations associated with breathing. Just allowing the body to breathe itself in its own rhythm, its own depth and texture. So as one of those previous slides said, the aspiration is to place our curious attention on our experience, whatever our experience is. We're not trying to create a different experience, create anything different than who we are. It's curious, open acceptance to our life minute to minute. So in this way, right now, we're working with our natural breathing tempo and rhythm. And the idea being that we've placed our attention, we, by choice, placed our attention on the sensations of breathing. So we'll continue with that. Now, if attention wanders away and as you sort of drift, your attention drifts, that's completely fine. That's natural and normal. We have brilliant minds. As we notice, we can simply bring that awareness and attention back. And so we'll bring it back to counting. We'll actually do a little bit more with our breath. So we bring it back to breathing. So we're going to do some breath counting, which actually can help us to track a little more, keep our focus engaged with what we're doing. So the breath counting will count on an in-breath, we'll count 1. On the out-breath, we'll count 2. On the in-breath, we'll count 3. On the out-breath, we'll count 4. And the idea is we can count 1 to 10. And once we reach 10, we start back at 1. And we go up to 10. We just do this in a repetitive manner. If at any point you lose track of where you are, no problem. Just start back at 1. Start back at 1. So let's all give that a try for just a little bit, counting 1 to 10, breathing in as a count of 1, breathing out as a count of 2, and in this way. So very good. You noticed on that slide there were a couple of other practices. There's a labeling technique, which is another way that we work with our breath, and stop, feel, breathe, and be is another particular practice that was designed by Dr. Moll. But I think for those, I'll just invite you to tune in next week. And let's conclude the presentation, and we can open with the numbers we have now. Robert, I wonder if shall we just open up to reflections, thoughts, insights from the material that we've heard so far?
That's really my thinking. Just kind of reflecting on the information. I really felt like it was a good overview of a lot of the basics that we have done over the last 5 years. And by the way, all the information I mentioned about links and earlier stuff like the telecommunications week and the all that stuff's in the chat, as well as John's blog that this was taken from. But it just what I was thinking about, and I kind of wonder if other people experience this same thing, is what sort of jumped out at you in terms of, oh, I kind of forgot that, or maybe that's something I need to add to my morning routine, or my practice is out of balance, I really need to add this or that back. So just kind of encourage people to reflect on, because I found myself monitoring my thoughts about the material and about really to some degree the last 5 years as we listen to this overview. And sometimes we don't hear stuff until the moment's right. We can hear it over and over, but until we're really open to it. And so, yeah, that's kind of what I'm thinking of. Not a specific prompt question, but just kind of any ahas or any reflections, any decisions to do something differently about your routine, or how you respond to certain situations in life.
Great. Thank you, Robert. So yeah, please, anyone, you can just unmute and speak up, or you can put in the chat.
Presentation, lots of good information as always. Big one is just a neuroplasticity piece again, of not knowing that early in my career of strength and conditioning, knowing that some fitness can help with it, but just the ability that we can rewire our brain, just like we do learn a new skill, just that ability, if there's, as we would call ourselves, damaged or something, a little bit of meditation, a little bit of work, a little bit of effort, we can start to retrain the brain and kind of rehab our brain, which is an awesome thing. I like sharing neuroplasticity to our law enforcement. It just helps them understand that this thing has not been finished at 23 years of age, and we don't grow, so we can actually continually mold the brain. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome, Troy. We just completed a 10-week program in Ontario, and we had a new facilitator with us, and this person shared a personal story with me. I won't reveal who it is, but this person had a traumatic brain injury, severe traumatic brain injury, and took this person a number of years to recover. And when it happened, I'm not sure how many years ago, the protocols at that point was to do nothing. Lay down in a dark room with no or as little stimulus as possible. And the treatment now for traumatic brain injury has kind of flipped 180 degrees. The recommended treatment, as far as I understand, I'm not a doctor, but from what I understand, is to really engage in stimulation. And again, it can be engaging in stimulation to the point where I'm quite uncomfortable, or one can be quite uncomfortable, but stimulation of conversation with other individuals, trying to learn something, going out for walks, all kinds of things. And that the research is showing that people are bouncing back and recovering so much faster from traumatic brain injury. And it seems to point very much to this, that the brain is rewiring, that as you challenge it, it's not necessarily comfortable. And that little anecdote I gave about, when I'm trying to learn a new line on the guitar or the banjo or whatever, it's frustrating. It's like, I can't get it. I can't get it. But you do it over a few days, a few weeks, a few months, a few years, all of a sudden, I got it. It's right there, And obviously, we see people who are seem to be incredibly talented, and I would point to the book Grit. I just read the book Grit. Talent's a bit of it, but effort's a lot more of it, right? Those efforts. We're just harnessing that incredible capacity. I just think we're so lucky.
Yes, you got to put in the reps. And as Robert has shared with us from Amishi Jha, the mental push-up. I love that one too. Doing your reps, get a little bit of breathing. I get that extra push-up. I'm going to get a little stronger, a little more resilient. So thanks for that one too, Robert.
John, thank you for a comprehensive presentation. And yeah, all of these things, to remind us, even if we've heard it before, but put it together in an easy to understand, digestible way. And Troy, I'm right on the same page with you with the brain plasticity part, because I'm an old dog, and the old theory was you're not going to teach these old dogs new tricks. So there's a hopefulness in the research and the evidence that has shown that even characters like myself might be able to pick something up in the later years that, previously might have been thought of as impossible. Another thing that I would just comment on, and it's an interest because of talks that I've been introduced to, and John, you mentioned this about genetics is not necessarily and doesn't have to be a sentence. If you have a genetic predisposition for something, doesn't mean that if, in breast cancer for women, that you're going to get it. And the study of epigenetics above the genes, which is fascinating to me, which starts to look at, well, if it's 66% who got it with the gene, what happened to the other 35%? And that's the interesting part, because some people have the gene, but maybe through lifestyle choices and diet and exercise. And the things you were pointing out, for Alzheimer's and dementia, how do you keep the brain active? Well, do puzzles, do exercise, challenge the brain. So I enjoyed all of it, John, and thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Gary. And yeah, I'm also interested in, longevity, and as I move into my silver years, and this phenomenal research on how people who've never engaged in physical activity, physical exercise, are able to engage in their 70s and their 80s. There's even been some research, centenarians, more research those are very small sample sizes, but octogenarians who start weight training, and they have adaptations. The body adapts, right? The brain adapts, the body adapts. And it's incredible the way our body can heal, and which is what, I wonder, Troy, if you have any sense in this, but the way, kind of one of the ways we look at exercise is we sort of damage the body slightly. We do something that challenges the body. And I believe they say when you do resistance training, you kind of tear the muscles a little bit, and then it recovers, it repairs, and then adapts and says, I should be stronger because last time this guy kind of beat me up a little bit. So I'm going to have to, I think it's similar with the brain. It's like, yeah, I got frustrated because I couldn't get that guitar line down, or I couldn't remember that phrase in French. And the brain starts to adapt. That seems very simplistic, but
Reps and sets. It's the body break. I think the same with the brain is probably the same. You're breaking some pathways and rebuilding the new ones, and just repetition and repetition. It's eventually going to build. And you mentioned it on a small part with sleep, and there's just got off of 2 different podcasts on sleep with Matthew Walker and one on Dr. Kirk Parsley. Navy SEAL doctor, and the biggest thing is sleep. And partially talked about, which I'll share with Robert, short little 1 minute here, is he talked about if you're trying to learn a new skill, if you only had a short amount of time to do it in a week, is to try to chunk it in. If you're trying to learn a bunch of skills in fighting, if you did like 3 hours of training, take a 15-minute power nap, and then go back to training, keep doing that, the ability to rehearse and recycle and then to build some of those pathways with proper rest is massive, and your ability to study and retain information. So that's something I'm trying to bring to the recruits, to do power naps in the middle of the day to allow that cognitive break and then to come back to studying, so they're not just over inundated with information and not have a chance to actually process it in the brain. So a lot of good research and sleep coming out on that. So
I think I saw a smidgen of that. I think you posted something on Facebook that kind of got me curious. So yeah, if you share that with us, I'll get it out to everybody, because it is fascinating stuff.
most definitely the one with coaches and captains. One of my friends runs that podcast, and I listened to that one as an hour, and I shared it to all my department people. So my next avenue is tactical naps. The academy.
It's a skill, and you can learn to do it.
Yeah, we're doing our first yoga nidra tomorrow morning with recruits, so that'll be their first 10-minute session.
Yeah, yeah. I survived in decades in a career where I was sleep deprived by doing power naps, and it was incredible. But I had to kind of train myself to do it.
Yep, it's a learned skill.
Mm-hmm.
It's helped me a ton. So, thank you again,
Thank you, John.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight.